Hello and welcome to Vantage this week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. In the UK, after 14 years of Tory rule, the Labour Party has won with a huge majority, a landslide. Rishi Sunak has been replaced by Keir Starmer as the UK Prime Minister. We'll bring you the numbers, the colour and the highlights. And speaking of elections, in the US, President Joe Biden's campaign is in disarray. The Democrats are bleeding and they are hoping to be saved by Michelle Obama. But will she replace Biden? We'll discuss that. In India, a new set of criminal laws have been rolled out. We'll bring you the highlights. Also, are you paying for quality handbags or are you paying for the brand? A probe has found that a Dior bag that sells for $2,800 takes only $57 to make. All this and more coming up. Let's get started.
To the country, I would like to say, first and foremost, I am sorry.
A Labour landslide being predicted by Vertic by a catastrophe for the Labour Prime Minister in history.
What an amazing reception. We did it! I've just returned from Buckingham Palace, where I accepted an invitation from His Majesty the King to form the next government of this great nation.
Election results are out in the UK. Rishi Sunak is no more the Prime Minister. His Conservative Party has lost. The Labour Party has won by a landslide. Its leader, Keir Starmer, is the new UK Prime Minister. His rise to power marks a monumental shift in British politics. Tonight, we'll bring you the numbers, the reactions, the analysis and the implications, starting with the final result. The British Parliament has 650 seats. The majority mark is 326. The Labour Party has won 412 seats. It's a historic win for them, one of their best ever results, 412 seats. The Conservatives have been reduced to 121 seats, the worst ever performance for this party, the worst in their history, 121 seats. They were in power for the last 14 years. They're also called the UK's most successful party, but this time they've been wiped out. Their tally has dropped by 250 seats compared to the last election. But here's the interesting part. Compared to the last election, the 2019 election, the Labour Party's vote share has barely increased by just about 2%. And the Conservative Party's right-wing vote has split in at least 180 seats, which accounts for their massive loss. Plus, they've lost 20 points in vote share. So you could say that this is not so much a vote for the Labour Party as a vote against the Conservative Party. So what do we make of this result? Here are the 5 big takeaways. Number one, with 412 seats, Keir Starmer is very powerful. He is one of the most powerful prime ministers in the UK's recent history. Today, he promised to turn a page to rebuild his country. He said, change begins now. Listen to this.
You have given us a clear mandate, and we will use it to deliver change, to restore service and respect to politics, end the era of noisy performance.
We'll talk more about Keir Starmer in just a bit, but for the moment, let's focus on Rishi Sunak, the man he defeated. And that's our second takeaway. It's a humiliating loss for the Conservative Party. The British voters have completely rejected them. Sunak managed to retain his parliamentary seat, which is Richmond and Northallerton. It's a Tory bastion, and there were fears of him losing the seat, but he did not. Nonetheless, he suffered a devastating loss, and someone decided to rub it in earlier today.
Our democracy possible. I'd also like to thank the police who have ensured that we can conduct this balance here on the energetic and the British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence.
Well, that was a candidate holding up an L sign right behind Rishi Sunak while he was delivering his concession speech. The L here stands for loser. And the man holding the sign is called Nico Omilana. He's a YouTuber and one of the prank candidates in this election. It was a cheap stunt, but it's also a political reality for Rishi Sunak because he has lost. He's lost his prime ministership and also his party leadership. Today, he stepped down as the leader of the Conservatives. He said sorry and he took full responsibility for this defeat.
I am sorry. I have given this job my all. But you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
This result is a total decimation of the Tories. They're out of power and they've lost several safe seats. And that's the third takeaway. The Conservatives have lost 5 seats. 5 seats held by 4 former prime ministers. One of the biggest setbacks came from southwest Norfolk, where Liz Truss was defeated. She lost by barely 630 votes. Liz Truss is the UK's shortest-serving prime minister. She lasted in office for barely 44 days, after which she was replaced by Rishi Sunak. And Truss has made a new record today. She is now the first former prime minister to lose a seat in almost 100 years. The Conservatives suffered shock losses in 3 more seats, all of which were constituencies held by 3 former prime ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May and Boris Johnson. 3 former prime ministers. These leaders are now out, but their party could not retain their seats. The seats were captured by the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party. 12 senior Tory leaders have lost, including Penny Mordaunt. She's the current leader of the lower house. She was once a favourite to lead the Conservative Party, but now she's lost her own seat. So has Jacob Rees-Mogg, a former minister, Gillian Keegan, the education minister, and Grant Shapps, the defence minister. He blamed his defeat on a divided Conservative Party.
On door after door, voters have been dismayed by our inability to iron out our differences in private and do that and then be united in public.
Well, he has a point. The party has been divided for a while now. The defeat will only make it worse. Meanwhile, the far right has gained ground. That's our 4th takeaway. Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party have won 4 seats. Now, Farage himself has been elected to the parliament for the first time. This was his 8th attempt. The 8th time he fought an election, he's finally won for the first time. He was the face of the Brexit movement. He's also a confidant of Donald Trump, the former US president. So you understand his politics. Now, Nigel Farage's win is quite significant because his party is the far right and it divided the right-wing electorate. It took away the Conservative vote. It took away the vote from the Tories. So Reform's vote share potentially cost the Conservatives in 180 seats. And Nigel Farage says that this is just the beginning. He's now aiming for Labour strongholds.
This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly. We will now be targeting Labour votes. We're coming for Labour, be in no doubt about that.
There is a shake-up in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well, and that's the 5th and final takeaway. In Scotland, the Scottish National Party has suffered a shock defeat. They got just 9 seats, which is their worst result since 2010. And this is a huge setback for the Scottish independence campaign. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland too is sending a message of change. They have voted out the Democratic Unionist Party. Sinn Féin has emerged as the biggest party here. This is a party of Irish nationalists. In the past, they were linked to militants. You see, the island is divided into 2 parts. One is the country of Ireland. The second is Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. Now, this winning party, Sinn Féin, was linked to the IRA that called for leaving the UK and uniting Ireland. Now they're part of mainstream politics and they're one big in Northern Ireland, so that poses a new challenge for London. On the upside, Britain has elected its most diverse parliament yet. 87 MPs are from ethnic minorities. This includes 26 Indian origin MPs in the new UK Parliament. 4 MPs are of Pakistani origin. Almost all parties fielded non-white candidates this time. So broadly, this verdict should end months of political chaos in the UK with this decisive mandate and hopefully mark the beginning of a new period of stability. "2024 is a mega election year and France has been added to that roster." Quick primer. The European Union held parliamentary elections in the month of June. President Macron's Renaissance Party lost. Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally won. And it was a blow to the French president, so he took a gamble. President Macron decided to dissolve the parliament. He called for snap elections. There was no need for it, but I guess Macron was hoping to pull off the impossible. It would go down in history books if it worked. But right now, it's more or less backfired. Last Sunday was the first round of voting. The far right got 33% of the votes. Macron's centrists got 21%. So clearly the far right had won, but they did not get a majority, which is why there's going to be a second round. It's on the 7th of July, which is this Sunday, and Macron has gone missing. He's not been seen in public for some time now. Maybe he needs the alone time. After all, his move could lead to the win of the far right. But while Macron is silent, someone else is speaking up. This man, Kylian Mbappe. He's the captain of the French football team. Mbappe has called the results, and I'm quoting, catastrophic. The striker wants people to vote. He wants them to keep the far right away. It's a passionate appeal. But it may be too late for that, because polls show that the far right are on course for a victory. And if that happens, they will be in power for the first time since the Second World War. So it's a big deal for France. But how did the far right manage this? One man is being given credit, Jordan Bardella. He is just 28 years old. By next week, this time next week, he could be the Prime Minister of France.
I intend to be a Prime Minister of a cohabitation government, respectful of the Constitution and the office of President of the Republic, but uncompromising about the policies we will implement in the service of France and the French people.
Who is this young leader, and how did he make the far right appealing? Bardella is the son of two Italian immigrants. His family was not well-to-do. He was raised by a single mother. He was brought up in social housing. He lived in a Paris suburb where crime was common. It's a stark contrast from most French politicians. Most of them come from money and privilege, but not Bardella. That did not stop him, though. At the young age of 16, he joined the National Rally. Soon he got into the Sorbonne University. He was pursuing geography there, but in the middle of the course he dropped out. He chose politics over education, which brings us to his political career. Bardella's rise up the party ranks is a fascinating tale, mostly because it happened so fast. He first, in fact, became the party spokesperson. In 2019, he was the lead candidate in the European Parliament elections. At that point, he was only 23 years old. But Marine Le Pen was impressed with him. She treated him as her protege, someone who could take the National Rally forward. So in 2022, he became the party leader, the first person outside the Le Pen family to hold this position. It is, like I said, a remarkable rise, and Bardella has one key advantage, which is his age. He has shed the party's old image. He gave it a fresh boost, and it worked. For France's older generations, the far right is associated with the Nazis and the Holocaust. But for the youth, there is no such baggage. So Bardella used that in his favor. Plus, he wooed the youth on their favorite platform, which is TikTok. Bardella has nearly 2 million TikTok followers, which is more than most French politicians. His TikTok feed is a mix of fun videos and campaigning. On one side, he drinks wine, eats a bonbon, and talks about selfies. On the other, he discusses about cost of living, his views about immigration, and France's social fabric. But there's one thing that's constant. He does all of it in impeccable French tailoring.
Je veux dire franchement, non.
Ok. Bah, c'est mieux qu'on se parle franchement. Voilà.
A few moments later.
J'aime les pommes. Je pense que sur TikTok, ils sont dans les stars TikTok pour les edits avec Atal. Oui.
Now, making videos is one thing, governing is another, and that's what his critics accuse him of. They say he cares more about his looks and less about policies. Irrespective, Bardella could soon become the Prime Minister of France, all at the age of 28. But will it be a poison chalice for him? Well, history has the answer. In the last 50 years, only one French Prime Minister has gone on to become president, and that was Jacques Chirac. So can Bardella defy those odds? We'll be tracking his story. So the Democrats are bleeding, and as always, they're reaching out for their favorite band-aid, Michelle Obama, the former First Lady of the United States. Consider this latest poll. It looks at a hypothetical contest between Michelle Obama and Donald Trump. If they were to contest the presidential election, Michelle Obama and Donald Trump. And who wins the battle? According to this poll, Michelle Obama, 50% respondents say that they would vote for her, 39% say that they would vote for Donald Trump. So that's a decisive win. More importantly, according to this poll, she's the only Democrat who can win against Trump, which tells you a lot about her popularity. And it's not the first time that her name has come up in the presidential race. For Democrats, she's almost like a messiah. Anything goes wrong and she has to be summoned to save the party. But is this mere manifesting? Or is there more to it this time? Let's look at her profile first. America first heard of Michelle Obama in the year 2008. Her husband Barack Obama was campaigning for president. She was seen on the campaign trail. The crowds loved her. They rooted for the couple. And when Obama won, the popularity only grew. Michelle entered the White House. She took up the role of the First Lady and she shook things up. Now, the role of a US First Lady can be restricting. You shape your work to suit the demands of your husband. Michelle Obama did support her husband, but she also held her own. She launched campaigns, she advocated for military families, she promoted healthy eating, she kept it real, and that's why Americans loved her.
Be afraid. You hear me? Young people, don't be afraid. Be focused. Be determined. Be hopeful. Be empowered. Empower yourselves with a good education. Then get out there and use that education to build a country worthy of your boundless promise. Lead by example with hope, never fear.
Who doesn't like advice like that? And it shows in the ratings. Michelle Obama is one of the most highly rated US First Ladies in history. 8 years of her life were spent in the White House, but then came a new horizon. The Obama presidency ended, and that's when Michelle Obama really flourished. She was always popular, but now she could leave behind her First Lady role and just be herself. So she wrote books, gave speeches, signed a Netflix deal, hosted a podcast, motivated Americans to vote. Michelle Obama did all of it and made it look like a breeze. She was eloquent and empathetic. She never lost her cool, and the crowds loved that. Compare that to America's mercurial politicians. She seemed like a blessing. Plus, her modest roots and her journey to success added to the charm.
But what we're looking at today, a portrait of a biracial kid with an unusual name and the daughter of a water pump operator and a stay-at-home mom. What we are seeing is a reminder that there's a place for everyone in this country. Because as Barack said, the two of us can end up on the walls of the most famous address in the world.
In 2020, Gallup named her as the most admired woman. She has a favorability rating of 60%, which is all great. But is it enough to be the president? It depends on who you ask. Part of Michelle Obama's charm is the issues that she advocates for. I mean, look at them. Healthy eating, supporting veterans and their families, voting. What's not to like about them? None of it is controversial. But she's never spoken about complex or divisive issues, not spoken about them enough. For example, the Gaza conflict, no word from her on that. Political neutrality is part of her brand. She chooses issues that serve her cause or the causes that she takes up. Secondly, she has never held a public office. She hasn't formulated policy. She doesn't have a voting record. So you don't know how much she will hold up in the real political world. And to be fair to her, Donald Trump did not have any of it in 2016 either, and yet he managed to beat Hillary Clinton. So I guess the bigger question here is, does Michelle Obama even want to run for president? And the answer is a big no. She has said it multiple times. She does not seek an office. She does not want to run. She does not want to be in the White House again. That's what she's been saying. But the Democrats aren't giving up hope. Will their daydreaming get them anywhere? We're not too sure about that. Tonight we'll talk about India's biggest security challenge, China. The border situation has been festering. Will Prime Minister Modi's third term see a new approach towards China? Is New Delhi adopting a tougher line? And why do we want to discuss this tonight? Because of a meeting that was held earlier today in Astana. It's the capital of Kazakhstan. They're hosting the SCO summit, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India and China are members. Their foreign ministers met today, that's S. Jaishankar and Wang Yi. They discussed the border standoff and agreed to quote-unquote redouble efforts to resolve the crisis. Jaishankar spoke about this last month as well. He said it's a priority for India.
चीन के बारे में हम तो हमारी फोकस तो होगी कि सीमा में जो स्थिति जो है उसमें अभी भी कुछ इश्यूज बाकी बचे हुए हैं तो उसको कैसे निपटाया जाए.
The question is, how will India solve them, these border issues? In today's meeting, Jaishankar adopted a slightly different approach. He calls it the three mutuals: mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and mutual interest. The minister said that these 3 points will guide India's relationship with China. But what does this mean in practical terms? Has the Modi government firmed up its China strategy in its third term? Let's look at some recent events and try to join the dots. First of all, Prime Minister Modi is not attending the SCO summit himself. Chinese President Xi Jinping is there, so is Russian President Vladimir Putin, but the Indian Prime Minister has chosen to skip it and he sent his foreign minister instead. Beijing sees this as a sign. Chinese observers believe that New Delhi has frozen contact at the highest levels because of the border standoff. The negotiations remain stalled. In the last 4 years, the two sides, India and China, have met some 21 times. India has pushed for a complete disengagement of Chinese troops. On 2 separate occasions, Prime Minister Modi has personally conveyed this to Xi Jinping. Last year in Johannesburg, Modi spoke to Xi at the BRICS summit. Reports say they did discuss the border and they agreed to a speedy disengagement. But Beijing did not walk the talk. A similar exchange happened in 2022 as well. At the G20 summit in Bali, Modi and Xi were seen together at the leaders' dinner. Later, India and China confirmed that they talked about the border and agreed to stabilize the line of actual control, LAC. The de facto India-China border. They agreed to stabilize it. So in every meeting, the Chinese leader agrees to pull back troops. But his soldiers remain where they are. And this duplicity has upset India. It has little incentive to bother with engagements at the highest levels, especially at forums like the SCO, where China's influence is evident. New Delhi has demonstrated this displeasure in other areas too, like in the economic relationship with China. A few weeks ago, a story emerged. Beijing had reached out to New Delhi. It wanted India to resume direct passenger flights to China. They were stopped during the pandemic. China wants these direct flights to resume. Over the past year, Beijing has repeatedly raised this request with New Delhi. Chinese airlines too have made an effort. They've made appeals to India's civil aviation authorities, but so far New Delhi has refused. No direct flights between India and China. India has also taken a tougher position on issues that China is sensitive about, like Tibet and Taiwan. Last month, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te congratulated Prime Minister Modi after the election results. And the Prime Minister responded, saying that he looked forward to developing closer ties with Taipei. A few weeks later, India hosted a delegation of American lawmakers. They met the Dalai Lama in Dharamshala. The visit was planned after the US Congress passed the Reform Tibet Act, an act that calls on Beijing to talk to the Tibetans. Prime Minister Modi then hosted this American delegation at his residence as well. Beijing lodged a firm protest against this.
The so-called Tibetan government in exile is an out-and-out separatist and political group. It is an illegal organization that completely violates the constitution and laws of China and is recognized by no country in the world. With regard to the contacts and negotiations between the Chinese government and the 14th Dalai Lama, Our policy is consistent and clear. The key is that the 14th Dalai Lama must fundamentally reflect on and thoroughly correct his political views.
China keeps making such statements, but India remains undeterred. Its messaging is quite clear and quite significant. If China ignores India's concerns on the border, India can respond in kind. India can put pressure on China when it comes to Tibet, Taiwan, and the economic relationship. Essentially, here's the takeaway for Beijing. You cannot have a normal relationship with tens of thousands of troops deployed at the border. India's clear weakness here is its trade dependence on China. It cannot be reduced overnight. So the next best option is to stay the course on building pressure, because that's the only language that China understands. It was a blockbuster day in India's parliament. Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered his longest speech yet. He spoke for more than 2 hours and 14 minutes, and it had all the ingredients: lines from a Bollywood classic, personal taunts, and a list of his government's achievements. But things were not off to a good start. Modi's speech was a reply to the motion of thanks to the president's address. It's a customary event for every session of parliament. It's customary. Yesterday, it was the opposition's turn. They used the opportunity to corner the government. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi spoke first. It was his first speech after being appointed leader of the opposition. His speech did garner a lot of attention. At one point, the Prime Minister himself rose to rebut him. It was a rare intervention by Prime Minister Modi. Take a look at this.
विषय बहुत गंभीर है. पूरे हिंदू समाज को हिंसक कहना ये गंभीर विषय है. बीजेपी को आपको नहीं नरेंद्र मोदी जी पूरा हिंदू समाज नहीं है.
Today was Prime Minister Modi's turn. He was expected to answer the issues raised by the opposition, but as he began speaking, chaos broke out. Opposition MPs began shouting and chanting. Some of them also rushed to the well of the House, and I guess this was expected. The opposition now has a larger presence in the Lok Sabha, and more numbers equal more voice, or in this case, more disruption. But it's a new experience for the Prime Minister. He's had complete control over the Lok Sabha since 2014, so the constant heckling was a challenge. Perhaps that's why the Prime Minister decided to put on his headphones while speaking. It's a departure from his previous speeches. Now we come to the content. Modi began by attacking opposition parties. He called the Congress a parasite for its allies. He also accused them of spreading lies. But the sharpest criticism was reserved for Rahul Gandhi. Prime Minister Modi did not take his name, but the message was quite clear. He repeatedly referred to Balak Buddhi, which loosely translates to childish behavior, an obvious reference to Rahul Gandhi. He also borrowed lines from Bollywood classic Sholay to take on the Congress. Listen to this.
99 मार्क्स लेकर एक बालक घमंड में घूम रहा था. ये 100 में से 99 नहीं लाया, ये तो 543 में से लाया है. अब उस बालक बुद्धि को कौन समझाए कि तुमने फेल होने का वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बना दिया है. कल सदन में यही बचकाना हरकत देखी है. कल यहाँ बालक बुद्धि का विलाप चल रहा था, इसलिए मैं उनको भी परमात्मा कुछ सद्बुद्धि दे, मैं बालक बुद्धि को भी सद्बुद्धि दे, इस अपेक्षा के साथ आज हिंदुओं पर झूठा आरोप लगाने की साजिश हो रही है, गंभीर षड्यंत्र हो रहा है. ये कहाँ गया? हिंदू हिंसक होते हैं? ये है आपके संस्कार? ये है आपका चरित्र? ये देश शताब्दियों तक इसे भूलने वाला नहीं है.
Again, this is something new. In the past, Prime Minister Modi has targeted the Congress party, but he never spent time attacking Rahul Gandhi in the House. So what prompted this one? Yesterday's speech. Rahul Gandhi levelled multiple allegations at the government on Manipur, on NEET, on minorities. He also targeted the Prime Minister personally. At one point, he mocked the Prime Minister, saying that he had a direct line to God.
एक दिन प्रधानमंत्री 8 बजे कहते हैं, पता नहीं फाइन ट्यूनिंग हो गई भगवान के साथ, डायरेक्ट मैसेज भगवान, सर ने बोला है, सर प्रधानमंत्री ने ये बोला है, ये मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूं, प्रधानमंत्री ने बोला है कि मेरा डायरेक्ट कनेक्शन है भगवान के साथ। ये प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा है, पब्लिक में मीडिया को कहा है कि मैं बायोलॉजिकल नहीं हूं, मेरा डायरेक्ट कनेक्शन भगवान के साथ है, मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूं। और जो लोग अपने आप को हिंदू कहते हैं वो 24 घंटा हिंसा हिंसा हिंसा, नफरत नफरत नफरत, असत्य सत्य असत्य।
It was a very sharp attack, something the Prime Minister has not experienced in Parliament, hence the decision to hit back, to target Rahul Gandhi personally, and the criticism was not limited to the party or the leader. Modi kept talking about the Congress ecosystem, perhaps a reference to Congress allies and their civil society backers. The Prime Minister focused heavily on that point.
कांग्रेस के साथ ही कांग्रेस का इकोसिस्टम भी रहा है। ये इकोसिस्टम से मिली खाद पानी, इसके दम पर एक कांग्रेस की मदद से ये इकोसिस्टम 70 साल तक फला फूला है और उसकी इकोसिस्टम दिन रात बिजली जला करके हिंदुस्तान के नागरिकों के मन में ये प्रस्थापित करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि उन्होंने हमें हरा दिया है। मैं आज इकोसिस्टम को बता देना चाहता हूं, उसकी हर साजिश का जवाब अब उसी की भाषा में मिलेगा।
And what about policy? The Prime Minister did talk about Kashmir. He focused on the changes since Article 370 was removed. He also spoke on NEET. Now, we've talked about this before. The NEET is a common entrance test for medical courses in India. But this year's exam is mired in controversy. It has put the spotlight on paper leaks and corruption in the education system. Prime Minister Modi did talk about it, and he promised a resolution soon.
मैं भी देश के हर विद्यार्थी को, देश के हर नौजवानों को कहूंगा कि सरकार ऐसी घटनाओं को रोकने के लिए अत्यंत गंभीर है। नीट के मामले में पूरे देश में लगातार गिरफ्तारियां की जा रही है।
Manipur was not mentioned though. Opposition MPs kept chanting Manipur throughout his speech, but there was no mention of it. In fact, Rahul Gandhi has written a letter to Prime Minister Modi. He's seeking a debate on the violence there. Let's see how the government responds to that. But beyond the personal insults and attacks, what did these 2 days teach us? Broadly, 2 things. One, this is not the parliament of 2019 or 2014. The opposition is a lot stronger, so chances are the government will be challenged a lot more. It will not be one-way traffic. And 2, we may see more of the Prime Minister. In the last 10 years, cabinet ministers were fielded to take on the opposition, but now the opposition is stronger, so the Prime Minister may be called upon to intervene more, to personally take on the opposition. On paper, this is not really bad for democracy. The parliament is supposed to be a place for discussion and deliberation and occasionally even disruption. But the focus must be on constructive work. Taxpayers are spending millions to keep the parliament running, so time is money and duty. Disrupting alone cannot be the opposition strategy. Their job is to question the government and keep them honest. So let's hope that cooperation and debate can coexist. And we saw an example of that in Parliament today, in fact. Dozens of opposition MPs were seated in the well as the Prime Minister spoke. After a while, he handed one of them a glass of water. I guess that's a good note to end the story on.
आदरणीय सभापति जी, मुझे एक किस्सा याद आता है।
It's a big day here in India because a new set of laws has been rolled out. Laws that affect every Indian citizen. Criminal laws. There are 3 new ones now. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita and Bharatiya Saksha Adhiniyam. All 3 were passed in December last year by India's parliament. They have replaced colonial era laws. Now, if you're into courtroom dramas, you must have heard of them. IPC or the Indian Penal Code, CRPC or the Criminal Procedure Code and the Indian Evidence Act. These 3 do not apply anymore in criminal cases in India, only the new ones will. I guess the obvious question is why? There is a symbolic and practical reason. More than 7 decades have passed since India's independence, yet our laws dated back to colonial times. So clearly it was time for an overhaul. It was time for Indian laws made by Indians. And that's not the most important reason. As time passed, India's laws have gotten outdated. Some provisions and procedures did not make sense at all. So reform was the need of the hour. Most legal experts and political parties agree with it. There was a need for reform, but they disagree on the specifics, on what kind of reforms, on how these laws were drafted. The opposition says that there was not enough consultation, but the Home Minister of India has pushed back. He says the issue must not be politicized.
इतने बड़े सदियों के बाद हो रहे सुधार को पॉलिटिकल कलर देना मैं मानता हूं ठीक नहीं है। मेरे तो सभी विपक्ष के साथियों से विनती है, पॉलिटिक्स करने के ढेर सारे मुद्दे हैं, आराम से करिए पॉलिटिक्स, कोई चिंता नहीं, हम भी जवाब देंगे। मगर ये कानून देश के 140 करोड़ नागरिकों को संविधान का जो स्पिरिट है, न्याय और आत्मसम्मान, वो समय पर दिलाने की एक एक्सरसाइज है।
Let's take a closer look at these laws now. What are the main highlights? Number 1, the new laws recognize murder on the grounds of caste or community. It is now considered a separate offence, distinct from other murders. Lynching is also a separate offence. The Supreme Court had asked the government for a new law, so the government has included it. Highlight number 2, new rules for organised crime and terror. Earlier, these provisions were spread across different laws, for example, the UAPA. States like Maharashtra had their own region-specific laws. The idea is to do away with all of that, to centralize and simplify the rules. Highlight number 3, penalizing intercourse via deceit. Say someone made a false promise of marriage or promised a job or hid their identity to have sexual relations with a woman. Then this law will kick in. The maximum punishment is 10 years in prison, but some legal experts are concerned about this. They say even consensual relations could later end up being criminalized. Highlight number 4, extension of police custody. The CRPC was very clear about this. An accused can spend 15 days in police custody. After that they must be sent to judicial custody. Now, this time limit has been extended from 15 days to 90 days, 90. So the cops can keep an accused for up to 3 months now. Again, there are concerns about this. More time in police custody raises fears of torture and tampering. Highlight number 5, focus on speedy justice. Charges must be framed in 60 days. Trial judgments will have to be delivered in 45 days. Highlight number 6, inclusion of community service as a punishment. Now, this mainly applies to small crimes like petty theft or defamation. Earlier, these offences carried jail time and fines, but now community service is also an option. The laws do not specify what service, so the decision is up to the judge handing out the verdict. Maybe street cleaning or volunteer work. Highlight number 7, zero FIRs. Now, FIRs are first information reports, as you would know. When you file a complaint, the police fill out an FIR. But jurisdiction is sometimes a problem. Each police station has its own area of operation, its own jurisdiction. So beyond that, they may not file FIRs. But that should not happen anymore. Zero FIRs can be filed at any police station. Jurisdiction of the crime does not matter anymore. Highlight number 8. Sedition has been removed as a crime. Instead, a new provision has been introduced. It talks about offences against the state, basically treason. So while scrapping sedition is welcome, the potential impact of this new provision is still unclear, and some experts say that it's equally draconian. Highlight number 9. Intercourse with a minor wife will be considered rape. Again, this was a long pending issue. The earlier laws only banned it for brides below 15 years of age. But this one rectifies that. It provides justice to brides aged 15 to 18 years. And finally, highlight number 10. Trial in absentia has been introduced. Earlier, you could record evidence in the absence of the accused, but conducting a trial was not allowed. It was only permitted rarely in cases of UAPA. But that's not the case anymore. Trials can now be held in absentia for certain crimes, meaning people can be tried and convicted without finding them. And this does happen in other countries, but it's a first for India. And we've only mentioned 10 highlights here. Laws like these will take months to get used to. All new cases will now be registered and tried under the new laws. The first one was filed in Gwalior today. As for the old cases, the cases that are already on, the old laws still apply. I know it sounds a bit complicated, but that's the nature of overhauls. They consume time and effort. Imagine this. You're cruising at 40,000 feet, probably enjoying a glass of wine. The seatbelts are off, the cabin lights are dim, the conditions outside are cloudless, and suddenly there's a big jolt. The plane has started shaking. You feel a pit in your stomach. This is known as turbulence. Now, we've all heard of bumpy plane rides, a few jolts here and there. But what if turbulence turns deadly? This was Air Europa flight UX045 flying from Madrid to Uruguay. But mid-air, it ran into turbulence. It was so bad that passengers, who were then patients, were thrown out of their seats. Some of them went up in the air, others hit the ceiling. One passenger was hanging out of the overhead luggage compartment. People had multiple cuts on their bodies. Some even had fractures. The situation was so bad that the plane had to make an emergency landing. It landed in Brazil. 30 passengers were given emergency care. 10 others were taken to the hospital. Now, if you feel like you've heard this before, you have, because deadly turbulence is becoming the new normal. In the month of May, severe turbulence hit a Singapore Airlines flight. The plane dropped around 178 feet in less than 5 seconds. One passenger died of cardiac arrest. 20 others were sent to the intensive care unit. 71 were heavily injured.
It was pretty bad, yeah. But there were lots of people in worse positions than me. People were laying out on the floor and they couldn't move. They were completely paralysed.
In the same month, a Qatar Airways flight had a similar experience. It was flying from Doha to Dublin. 12 people were injured. Another Turkish Airlines flight too dropped mid-air. The turbulence was so bad that a flight attendant broke her back. So what explains all these incidents? What exactly is turbulence? Why is it becoming more dangerous? Will air travel become deadly in the future? First, let's look at turbulence. Turbulence takes place when a plane flies through disturbed air. It is expected in most cases, like when planes are flying over seas or mountains, or when a plane is flying through a thunderstorm cloud. Usually it is mild. In some cases, there's moderate jolting. Pilots expect it. They try their best to keep the flight steady. And all of this is part of regular flying, nothing new there. But then comes clean air turbulence. The conditions may be perfect. There could be no clouds in the sky, but the plane is suddenly hit by a stream of air. It makes the plane shake. Now, clean air turbulence is very difficult to predict, and it's getting more and more severe. The reason is our usual culprit, climate change. Since 1979, severe turbulence has only risen. It's gone up by 55%. And scientists point towards the changing climate. Warmer air from emissions is changing how jet streams work. So plane rides will become more bumpy. Are there any routes that you should avoid? Well, turbocharged turbulence is a global phenomenon, but a few flight routes will be more affected, like the North Atlantic, Western Pacific, Southeast China, and Northern India. If you're flying over any of these routes, expect more turbulence. Which brings us to a very important question. Is air travel becoming dangerous? Well, there's nothing soothing about flying in a pressurized metal cabin, thousands of feet in the air. But in general, flights are quite safe. Modern planes are built to be sturdy. They can hold up against the worst of turbulence, so do not worry about them breaking apart mid-air. But it's not just us. Airlines hate turbulence too. It's terrible for the planes. Turbulence leads to structural damage. Every year it costs the airline industry up to $500 million. So what can we do about it? Of course, we cannot prevent turbulence, but airlines are now investing into more sophisticated technology, radars that will be able to predict the weather ahead. Plus, more and more airlines are sharing data so that everyone on a turbulent route gets a warning. Which brings us to you, the passenger. What can you do? Well, not very much. You will probably have to sit through it. But here's a piece of advice. Keep your seatbelt on at all times, no matter what the sign above you says. It may sound restricting, but it could become the difference between life and death. For our next story, let me ask you two questions. Do you own a luxury handbag? And do you plan to buy one? Well, then, here's some news for you. Recently, Italian prosecutors investigated the factories of Dior and Armani, and this is what they found: unsafe working conditions and illegal workers. But more importantly, they stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Dior pays its suppliers $57 to make a bag. $57. That's around 5,000 Indian rupees for one bag. That's what it costs Dior, $57. Do you know how much they sell it for? Around $2,800. That's nearly 2.6 lakh Indian rupees, which is 50 times the cost of making. What explains this stupendous price markup? Are you paying for quality handbags or are you paying for the brand? The revelation has triggered a whole new debate about luxury handbags. Here's a report.
Do you have a Dior bag on your wish list? Maybe the book tote or the classic Lady Dior. But here's something you should know before you buy it. Dior pays its suppliers $57 per handbag. How much do they sell them for? A whopping $2,800. That's almost 50 times more. Even if you consider the price of leather, it won't be any better. This was revealed in a sweeping investigation by Italian prosecutors. They looked into Dior's third-party suppliers, and here's what they found. The luxury brand exploited workers. It did not check working conditions of its contracting employees. In one facility, workers were found sleeping inside. Why? So that bags could be produced around the clock. Most of these workers were from China. Some of them were living in Italy illegally. Plus, safety rules were regularly exploited. In these factories, safety devices for gluing the bags were removed so that the workers could operate them faster. But it's not just Dior who's guilty of this, so is Armani. Armani paid its contractors $99 for a bag. And how much did they sell it for? Almost $1,900. Now, both these companies are under scrutiny. They have been placed under judicial administration for a year. But it's not just a Dior or Armani phenomenon. This is happening across the fashion industry. Violating labor laws is a staple for luxury giants. They do it to make more money. People are mistreated, rules are flouted, there are no safety precautions. And those Italian leather handbags that you're so proud of are most probably made in China. So what then justifies the ridiculous cost? Well, there are a few reasons, and none of it is linked to superior quality. One is the brand reputation. The bigger the name, the more the number of zeros on the price tag. Think Dior, Hermes and Chanel. Then comes scarcity, and it's a great marketing tactic. The lesser goods you produce, the higher the price. You create a situation where these bags are not easily accessible, so consumers will do anything to buy them. So you're not just paying for the bag, but for the brand name and the status that comes with it. It all comes down to human psychology. a luxury good is a non-essential product. Consumers can live without them. But the satisfaction of owning a luxury good is a motivator. Luxury goods are often attached to a sense of accomplishment, a feeling that you have made it in life, and that's why people scramble to get a hold of them. But consumers err in thinking that a higher price means better quality. That's almost never the case. It's no secret that luxury handbags are overpriced. Almost a 5-time markup is common. This is used to cover the operational costs. But inflating the price by 50 times is daylight robbery. Luxury brands are preying on people's sense of insecurity and need for social validation. You may be thinking you're paying for premium leather and craftsmanship, but actually, you're paying for the glitzy marketing campaigns and the fancy stores.
For our last story tonight, let me take you back to the 1920s, or what the Americans like to call the Roaring Twenties. This was a period of social and economic change in the country. Also, a period of little to no alcohol. Between 1920 and 1933, selling alcohol was prohibited in the US. So Americans made their way to bordering Mexico. And the city of Tijuana quickly became a favorite. Americans visited it in droves, especially on this day, the 4th of July, which is the US Independence Day. Our story begins on July 4th, 1924, at a Tijuana restaurant. It was owned by an Italian immigrant called Cesar Cardini. The restaurant was brimming with customers. Cardini was low on ingredients, so he tossed together what he had on hand: lettuce, raw egg yolk, olive oil, parmesan, lime juice. And there you had it. In a moment of desperation, the Caesar salad was born. Today, it has turned 100 years old, the salad. And why are we telling you this? Because this century-long culinary saga is an underdog story. Despite the humble roots, the world still hails the Caesar salad. It has become the pride of Tijuana. It has fascinated nations and generations across the world. There are reinventions of the salad from Sweden to Japan. There are books, there are TV shows, memes and TikTok trends. Not many recipes survive a century, and there are very few that enjoy a renaissance. Sure, not everyone is happy about this. Did you know that the dish was originally designed to be picked up and eaten, kind of like finger food? But today the salad usually comes with chopped leaves. Maybe chefs think any salad can be Caesar salad if they stab it enough. But according to salad purists, chopping the leaves is only the first crime. This dish has gone from being a sidekick to a superstar, and this journey has seen several wacky twists. The salad is being dressed with yogurt, tequila, kimchi, rice crackers, and even pig ears. And we don't mean to turn this into a ballad of salad. But that's the thing about this dish. There is no right recipe. You could say it applies to all kinds of salads. The only thing certain is that it needs salt, because the name salad comes from the Latin word sal, which means salt. Oil, vinegar and pepper are some other condiments. But when it comes to the main ingredients, there are no rules really. According to food historians, the earliest salads were wild greens. Ancient Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks and Romans all consumed mixed greens, usually with a combination of salt and vinegar. As time passed, the salad saw additions like pasta, bread and olive oil in France and Italy, fruits and pepper in India and Nepal. We've come a long way since then. Thanks to the internet and wellness trends, salads are now a health fad. According to experts, the global packaged salad market, the market size is worth more than $12 billion. And this should be good news. Salads are the default the healthy living food, the poster child of a rainbow diet. But this is slightly concerning as well, this trend, because not all salads are healthy. I'll give an example. According to a survey, an average American eats 4 salads a week, but the salads are tossed with lots of dressing. Ranch, blue cheese and Thousand Island are some of the most famous salad dressings. They taste great, but they're also high in calories. And this is not just an American problem. The global salad dressing market is estimated to be worth $80 billion. That's $80 billion. Salad dressings. That's a whole lot of sauce and calories. And we're not purists ourselves, but if there's one thing we can learn from the Caesar salad today, it is this: bland does not have to mean boring. And sometimes salad is at its best when it's simple, which is probably why French fries is not a potato salad.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.